Welcome everybody. Today is October 24th, 2019, and we are here to talk about the CIM Project Suite, corridor tools and workflows in Civil 3D. This is the second part of a two-part series where we're talking about the CIM Project Suite and its interaction with corridors. But before we go any further, I want to go ahead and just kind of refresh ourselves on some of the reasons why we're interested in designing with corridors in the first place. So corridors give us an ability to maintain a dynamic relationship with other Civil 3D objects in ways that the other tool sets just aren't designed to, especially not the grading object that some people might be tempted to use for those related relationships between all those feature lines. Another great opportunity that the corridor gives us is a tin surface, not just for our top, not just for our datum, but for any of those design components that we have codes ready to deal with. And lastly, we get to use corridors because they're going to make our section views really, really dynamic and much more automated, including the labeling of the design information that we're interested in. So how can you use the CIM Project Suite to make your life with corridors better? Well, in the first part of this series, earlier this month, we talked about tools like Assembly Namer, Corridor Splitter and Merger, and the Corridor Cleanup tool that allow us to do all of the things on screen. Since we already covered those, I won't go into them in detail today. But what we're here to talk about today is how we can dynamically link our targets to a subassembly by using layers. And the tool that we're going to use from the CIM Project Suite is the Corridor Mapper toolset. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hop right into the software. So here we are inside Civil 3D, and I've got a project where I have a roadway going down along a moderate section, an intersecting roadway. We won't be using that as part of our design today. And of course, my design and surface profiles, and so on and so forth. What I've also got available is my assembly, which is shown down here on the bottom right hand of the screen. So one of the use case that I'll be showing today is what I would call a simple corridor design. Now that doesn't mean that we don't have targeting or whatever else, but we're not including an intersection. We're just going to be doing a nice long single roadway or a single corridor model with that one roadway in it. But what is not so simple and what can be very frustrating is using conditional subassemblies for a target found, target not found workflow. So if we were going to be using these, we would want to go check out our Imperial subassemblies. We'd head over to the Conditionals tab, and we'd be using the conditional horizontal target. Now what this does is it helps us build a logical statement inside Civil 3D. So a really common case is we're going through and we're designing some sort of subdivision. Might be commercial, might be residential. But eventually, cars are going to want to turn off of the main travelway and go into some sort of side travelway. And so with that, we're going to have barrier curb, 6-inch, 9-inch, whatever. We're going to have barrier curb for a situation where we're in the main roadway. And we're going to have a mountable curb in an area where we're going to, well, mount our vehicle and drive over top of that. So this is a little bit more of a situation where we've got a sidewalk. So when I need to drive over, obviously I'm going to have some pavement. I'm going to have my sidewalk section, and then I'm going to have some additional pavement that's going to tie back into some sort of targetable object. In my case today, we'll be using the right-of-way. And for a situation where I'm using my barrier curb, what I'm going to be interested in doing is using a link for my topsoil, whatever else, but a grassy enclosure. I would have my sidewalk behind that, and then more boulevard going until I tie into that same right-of-way point. Or whatever, it could be the right-of-way, it could be just some other known opportunity to do so. And then down here, I've got my section view, which I will come back to at the end of the session. But as we all know, it is entirely possible to go through and go edit our corridor targets and use the main dialog, and we can go find our target found, and we can go pull the polylines from a layer and go find my driveway left from my driveway left. And that's all fine and good. But what happens when I add more targets to this left layer. Well, I can see that those came in, but when I add more, I've got to go through that whole process over and over and over again. But Corridor Mapper makes that process really easy. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to wipe those targets out, and we'll see how this behaves when we're using Corridor Mapper. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is go get my CIM Project Suite ribbon. Now, if you purchase or download the trial for these tools and install them, you're going to get a new ribbon in here, which has all the commands for these tools. Today, we're looking at the corridors panel, and the 4 tools related to Corridor Mapper are these 4 on the right with drop-down setup or auto map targets. First things first, we need to set all of these up, and what I'm going to see is a screen that looks a little different, but is subdivided in much the same way as that native targeting dialog box. I can choose my corridor, a particular baseline, or a particular region within that corridor, and then I have my surface, horizontal, and vertical targeting. So to go ahead and start, I'm going to set my slope targets, or my surface targets rather, to my existing surface. And what we'll see is when I say I have a subassembly, and I have a layer that I'm looking at, since my surface lives on that layer, it's going ahead and it's finding that target. And I'll assign the second one as well. And even right here, I'm going to go ahead and apply so we can see how that goes through into the drawing. I'll just move my window a little more. And it's going to confirm. Oops, I accidentally cleared those layers. Just a moment. And it's going to say, hey, here's what I found. I found all of these different types of targets. So in my surface, I've got 2. And as soon as I do that, I can see, looking at my daylight subassembly, for demonstration purposes, I've got surface targets on the left, and I'll have those right of way or known location direct targets on the right. But I've got my 3-to-1. Yes, 3-to-1. I've got my 3-to-1 side slope going off the side of there. So, okay, cool, Kyle. I could have done that natively, but no big deal. Corridor Mapper does work. Now what we're going to do, though, is I'm going to set up the targets for those conditionals. And what I've done is I've named my subassembly driveway left. And I'm going to go through, and that's always great practice. I always like to put caps locks on the names of my subassemblies that I'm going to target. So I come through here and I can say, all right, well, all of the polylines from my left side live on the left layer. All right, no big deal. But what if I've also got another set of polylines or another set of objects and my subassembly name matches my layer name? Well, there's a tool here inside here that will find those for you, and it will automatically map them. So my driveway right layer has 8 polylines that live on it. And since the name of my layer and the name of my subassembly match, it's going to automatically map those and apply them together. So what we can see here is that it's gone through and it's found all of those different targets on both sides, but the layers are keeping those straight. And now I can see that my corridor has gone ahead and built those subassemblies. And it's built with the targeting that I put in place. And I can see here in my little section view at station 1030 and change that it is in fact going to behave that way. And on my left side of my roadway, I've got the mountable curb where it went ahead and found the logic statement that it was looking for. And on the right side of my section, I've still got barrier curb because there is no target there. So that's where the real power of Corridor Mapper comes into play. Now, what would happen if I were to take more objects from my driveway layer and add them into my corridor? Well, I can find out by running a simple AutoCAD copy. And I'll put down a few more of these, including one over by the area of my section. And I can go through and I can, if I wanted to, I could go through the map targets dialog and see that it was going to go ahead and find those extra ones. But here's where the real power of this tool comes into play. The annoyance of going through the native targeting dialog box, you got to find your corridor, edit your targets, go pick your region, and go through all that pain. It's 5 clicks just to get to the dialog box that you want. Corridor Mapper, and its advantage is that you can have 3 clicks. Change the ribbon, drop your down, and go to the Auto Map button. And what Auto Map is going to do is it's going to take the target situation that you've already set up. I said, hey, find this subassembly, find objects on that layer, and map them to the subassembly. Now, before here, we were saying 28, and I added 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to find both of those on either side, so that's how we get to 36. And I'm just going to map that, and it's going to go through and it's going to pick those out. And we could see right here on my screen, since I put that conditional target down where my section line or my sample line was reporting, I could see that update for me automatically. So now when I'm going through and I'm creating a design that is very, should we say, a target-rich environment where I have a lot of things that I need to go through and manage, the design may change. If I'm doing a residential subdivision, I might have started out suggesting that block 1 was supposed to be 1 acre lots. Well, all of a sudden the developer came back and they got a zoning variance, and now they can go all the way down to 1/4 acre lots. That's a lot of driveway lines that I got to put in, and that's a lot more work that I have to go through for all of those regions to edit my targets and add those lines back in. If I were to go through and say, copy this region, start over here, come through this way, now I've got multiple regions, and again, going through that targeting parameter, I would have to go through and update each individual region or push those properties out or what have we. Whereas with Corridor Mapper, I can simply say, when I'm setting these targets up, I can do that for an entire corridor at a time. I can do it for an entire baseline at a time, or I can get that individual region by region play going through. And however big that's shown up, however many instances of here that I've got, it's going to go ahead and figure out. So that is kind of nice for why you might want to have your subassembly name match your driveway lane, is because then you'll have the opportunity to auto map those layers. But a couple of other things we can do to make life simpler. So I've got this subassembly, and it's called driveways right with no underscore or whatever else. So that means my layer is going to be found somewhere in, let me get my layer properties palette open. My layer is going to be in the middle of a D area, and I'm in my civil template, which means that I got to scroll a lot for all of that. Now, I'm not necessarily encouraging everybody to go through and break design standards, but the way this tool is set up is if you're not ready to auto map those right away, maybe you can come through and you can force a particular layer to show up at the top or the bottom of your list with an underscore or a Z respectively. Now that my driveway target layers live or will be shown at the top of that list, what I can do is I can actually automatically rename my layers or my subassemblies. And there's buttons that exist in the ribbon, but I'll just go ahead and do that from the mapping dialog box that are going to make this much easier for me to do later on. So when I have the subassembly driveway left, if I try to auto map this, that targeting is now gone. But I can go through and I can say, go find a layer, underscore driveways left. And I can make this easier for finding next time by renaming either my subassembly or my layer based off of each other. So I'm going to actually rename my subassembly in this case. And I will do so with that. I will run the apply button to make sure that that happens. It's going to go run through there. And I'll see that my subassembly over here just updated. And it went through, I've only got one assembly. So it went through, it found that subassembly, it found that subassembly layer link, and it went ahead and it auto mapped that for me. So that's the real design intent behind this. One thing that I do want to point out, though, is that corridor mapper is an all-in or an all-out decision. So if, for example, I added a bunch of surface targets to corridor mapper, or to my assembly, and I wanted to go through and use the edit target or corridor properties, set all targets, set over here, and I'll just go to none. My corridor is going to rebuild. That daylight link went away. As soon as I go back and remap these targets, though, through the automap function, what's going to happen is my corridor mapper definition is going to control. So I run the tool, corridor mapper says, hey, all of my surface targets are looking for my existing surface. My existing surface lives on the layer ctopo eg surface, and it went through and it reran it. So if we have to use corridor mapper once we decide to, and there's a really great reason to decide to when we're using a really target-rich design situation like the conditional subassemblies, then we need to know how we can do our entire corridor design using this tool. And to demonstrate this, I've got my right-of-way offset alignments and profiles. We can confirm this through our prospector. So I'll see that I've got my main street left and right basic offsets, including an offset alignment with a widening along a straight section. And these all have profiles associated with them, including my main street right-of-way profile also has, or right-of-way alignment also has a surface profile. So what we need to do using corridor mapper is we have to find a subassembly and a layer by which that object is found. Now with polylines, that association is really straightforward. Polylines are AutoCAD objects, and the only way to see an AutoCAD object is by putting it on a layer. Civil 3D objects, however, are a little bit more complicated. My alignment can live on really any layer that it wants to, but my drawing object settings are going to tell me how that happens. If I notice, when I go to see my alignments, all I have is alignments. I can't have a new object layer setting for a connected alignment or an offset alignment or this for my profiles. So unless I want one layer for every single alignment or profile that gets created, I'm stuck. I'd have to go back through and manually manage all of the layers for those objects. But we do, as being in Civil 3D, have the opportunity to use styles to our advantage. Now, this template was largely based off of the NCS template, and the NCS template has a lot of different ones. I would recommend that everybody has a centerline profile, a center line, an offset, a right-of-way, and an existing for alignments and for profiles. The intersection, that would be for using the connected alignment tool. If you're not going to do intersections, you're still probably going to use an offset and a right-of-way style. And when I go through and I check these styles out, what I see is that I have layer assignment available to me in my style. So for any of the lines, curves, or spirals that exist in my Civil 3D alignments or profiles, this is where I want to have my style assignment set up. So my proposed style is going to the centerline new layer. My offset style is going to my alignment offset layer, and my right-of-way style is going to my alignment right-of-way layer. Yet this object lives on C-road. My offset alignment, I manually moved that one over, but we can see that things can get a little interesting here. So my recommendation is that for the vast majority of your target alignments and profiles, let your style control that layer. Let's go ahead and look into corridor mapper. Let's remap our targets, or continue mapping them rather, and see what happens when we do so for our horizontals and our verticals. I'll use my lane left. Notice how I named that in all caps. And I'll go find that, and I want my alignment offset layer. For my lane right, it's going to be the same deal. road align offset. Actually do need to repath my assemblies over there. And my lane left, again, we're gonna set up as the alignment offset. So cue the Jeopardy music in the background while I go through and just put through these last few clicks. And we should have our horizontals all set up. The other thing I need is I need my right-of-way and my daylights to be put together correctly as well. So for these, I've actually got my horizontal as a layer of the profile right-of-way, sorry, the alignment right-of-way. And that's what's going to happen to both my driveway beyond the sidewalk and my boulevard beyond the sidewalk. Alignment right-of-way. There we go. And I'll leave the vertical targets off for now because I want to be sure that you all understand and you're keeping up with me for this. So obviously I just had a bunch of width and offset targets applied. But I should now see that my left side of my road is going to follow that offset alignment. And we do have that widening in there. And my right side of the road has also moved out. The back of curb used to be living right on top of that offset alignment. So I've gone through and I was able to find those because my alignment style is taking my offset alignment and it's putting it on all of those objects on the layer that I'm looking for. I can also see that in the second region where I actually set up those targets for my driveway / boulevard situation, I've gone out to meet that right of way. If I wanted to assign that in the previous one, I'd have to go through and either copy these properties over or go back into the the corridor mapper setup dialog and grab those. I'll just keep moving with the second region for the rest of the webinar. So the next thing I need to do though, is I need to confirm that my vertical information, sorry, I was trying to go for a copy. I've got two surface labels over here, just spot elevation labels, and I've got them set at the edge boundary of my corridor. I'll go put them right over here. And I can see that my daylight isn't quite lining up yet. My lower one is set to my existing surface, and my upper one is set to the surface that's being built by my corridor, my FG. So yes, I can go through and I can find a surface daylight target, and that's all fine and dandy. But in this case, where I might be tying into a known situation, I'm also going to be concerned with making sure that I can find those. So when I'm setting up my targets now, I'll only be looking at that second region, I believe. Let me simplify this a little bit. Only go with the one region. Not sure why. There we go. I'm not sure what was going on there, why the target mapping got lost. But I can see that I've got my lanes, my driveways, my horizontals, that's all set up. Now it's time to go through and make sure that my verticals are being matched. And for this, I've got layers on my profile set to my respective center line versus design versus offset. So profile offset for my left lanes, profile offset for my right lanes. And then these right-of-ways, I've got these set to a special layer that has the word surface in it because I'm looking specifically for my existing surface target at there. Because I'm not changing the design of areas of land that I don't own. And I've got a surface layer specifically for my center line, my connected alignments, my center lines, or my offsets. In this case, my right-of-way is an offset type alignment, and that is the layer that I'm going to go with. And now when I run this one last time, I will see that those spot elevation labels are going to match, as they do right here. So going through in my corridor, I've been able to not only set up all of the things that I normally would have to do, horizontal and vertical targeting for lanes, right-of-way tie-ins, or what have we, but now that I've got the rest of that stuff set up, it's all out of the box no matter what, I can come in here and I can take my conditional subassemblies and their targets, and I'll add 2 over there, and there's 2 hiding in here somewhere. And to update my design is as simple as coming up to, instead of setting my targets up, I'm going to auto map them. I'm going to choose my corridor. And it's just going to happen like magic. So the point of Corridor Mapper is when you have a very target-rich design situation, you're going to want to be able to quickly and easily update those targets. By using our AutoCAD layering and some nuances of our Civil 3D styles, we get to set that up once and just let our corridor update the way that our design is going to update. And it's just going to happen. So that kind of concludes my presentation from Civil 3D. One last thing I do want to point out is for these layer considerations, I'm only focusing on alignments and profiles. Obviously, feature lines have their own layer assignment versus the actual object or the style. But it is my recommendation that if you're going to go through this, you're going to want to have the following styles for your alignments. You're going to want a center line, an offset where you're going to have a design profile, which is that dynamic to your center line. And you're going to want a separate style for your right-of-way that's going to allow different display control, because you're probably going to have some sort of property line type. But you're also going to want to understand that this might involve a surface target. So an alignment right-of-way style is going to help make that easy in your big list. And then also a connected alignment type, which if you're doing an intersection design, which is not what we did today. If you have a connected alignment type, you're going to want its own layer in your template, and you're going to want style assignment for all 4 of these. For your profiles, you're still going to stick mostly with a style assignment on that layer. You'll need a centerline layout style and layer. You'll need an offset design / layout, and you'll need a connected alignment design / layout. And those design layouts need to have different layering than your surface layouts, or than your surface profile layers. So the proposed, the offset, the connected. For the surface targeting though, I went ahead and I threw the surface NCS tag at the front end, because I know I'm looking for a profile that is a surface target. After I find my surface target, there's some other stuff going on. But really the only one you're probably going to want to use for this is your actual right-of-way connection. It's very unlikely that you'll be doing a proposed design where you'll need to target the center line surface profile for your existing, or your connected alignment existing surface profile. That's why those are in gray. But rather than have a million styles, I found that it's easier to just assign these through the actual object. So my profile itself is going to live on the layer C, profile, surface, offset, and then also include the name of that surface. So another consideration, hopping back into Civil 3D, at this point in time, at the time of this recording, Corridor Mapper does not do a very good job with intersection designs or with multiple baseline corridors, in the sense of, hey, I have different objects on those layers that I can find. In the case of a simple corridor, and I say simple in the sense of there's not an intersection, but doing a nice long straight road with one set of curbs, one set of right-of-way, and one set of targets. This is the design situation that we proved, and this is a design situation where Corridor Mapper really excels when we've got that target-rich environment. So, in conclusion, what did we learn today? Well, we were reminded that corridors are very complicated. Managing them is rarely intuitive or easy. the CTC Express tool corridor mapper will assign all objects found on a layer as a target to a subassembly. This dynamic relationship that's set up within the tool allows your corridor to update in a few clicks with the auto map function. Corridor mapper excels in designs with lots of target objects, especially conditional horizontal subassemblies. And lastly, it is important to remember that corridor mapper is all in or all out. You can't switch back and forth between a traditional targeting workflow or the corridor mapping workflow. However, I've gone ahead and proven to you today that you should be able to do just about everything you need to between assigning surface targets or tying in with specific alignment and profile targets, or feature lines, which I didn't cover, but function the same way. With that, I want to go ahead and thank everybody for watching.